Welcome back, boys and girls. I will continue to read the book Race the Wild, Great Reef Games. Chapter 4, Clued In. We could barely see the whale, Mary said. Sage could tell she was disappointed. If the race organizers had not accepted Dev's picture, Team Red would have had to try to get a closer shot. I really love those big guys, Mary mumbled, more to herself than anyone else. Sage actually had a soft spot for whales too. Ever since her first grade teacher, Miss Sarah, had taught her class about blubber by doing a cool science experiment, she'd found them fascinating. Miss Sarah had used the same fluffy-looking white baking ingredient that Sage's mom used for making pie crusts. The experiment had shown how blubber helps keep whales and other large marine animals warm in near-freezing water. It was awesome. We need to keep moving, Sage said, half wishing she could stick around so Mary could get a better view. Look at all the other parasails. We can't be the only team that got the picture on the first try. Sage is right, Dev confirmed. And now we've got the next clue. He read it out loud. Reef animals must compete for space and for the food they eat. So the smart ones plot and scheme and work together as a team. Find and submit 3 examples. So we're looking for examples of symbiosis, right? Dave said. My science teacher called it mutualism, Sage offered, but I think it's the same idea. 2 different organisms living together and depending on one another. And both get something out of it, Russell added. Sage glanced at Mary. The other girl gave a slight nod and looked back at the ocean. It was weird that Mary hadn't commented on the clue yet. Normally, she would have rattled off a dozen answers by now. Javier had gave them a choice. They could look for examples while swimming around the reef, or they could all get in a glass-bottomed boat and view the reef from there. How are we going to communicate in the water? Do we get underwater two-way radios? Dave asked, rubbing his hands together in hopeful anticipation. Nice try, Javier said. But if you want to talk it through, the boat is your best bet. As much as Sage wanted to actually get in the water and be up close and personal with the wildlife, they all agreed to go with the boat. Okay then, Javier said. Gail, can you take us to the glass-bottomed boat port? Cole had just finished stowing away all the parasail equipment, so Gail revved up the engine. You're not going to let Russell drive? Dave asked. Sage could tell he was joking, but Gail looked as if she were considering it. No, I don't. No, don't, Sage said without thinking. Russell turned toward her, his eyes mischievous. I saw you up there, Russell said, pointing with his finger. I didn't need binoculars, to know you were scared. Sage felt the skin between her eyes double up as her eyes narrowed. You thought I was going to drop you, Russell laughed. No way. Not with my man Dev up there with you. He grabbed Sage's shoulder and laughed some more. Dev joined in. All Sage could do was force a smile. Maybe Russell and Dev thought this race was a joke, but she didn't, and she wasn't going to let them slow the team down. Russell did a great job, Javier said. His tone was always understanding and kind. But I think you would agree that we were in a hurry. Yes, everyone answered together. Sage sat down next to Mary. Being teamed with strangers was definitely awkward. Sage had known the kids on her track and swim teams for years, so they knew each other's strengths and weaknesses. But they never had to work together and devise strategies. Even in relays, they each ran their leg of the race on their own. The wildlife did not work that way at all. Still, Sage had never planned to apply for the wildlife by herself. She had always thought that she'd be teamed up with her sister, Caroline. Had she made the right decision? Maybe she should have waited until Caroline was ready to race. Caroline was the one person who got Sage. That would be nice right now. Sage put the thought out of her mind. Team Red was currently in the lead. If they managed to win the race, they'd split $1 million. That kind of money made a lot of things possible. Sage was counting on it. She needed it. It wasn't long before the boat pulled up to a tiny port where several vessels were docked. They were all long and slender, with canopies covering the open seating area and a cabin in the front. One look inside explained the name Glass Bottomed. Along the center of each boat was a row of windows that stretched almost the full length of the floor and offered a clear view of the sparkling blue water below. Let's go, team, Sage said. When she excitedly grabbed Mary's hand, the other girl's palm felt cold and clammy. As they clambered onto the nearest boat, Javier spoke up. It looks like another team is coming. You could wait and work with them on the next clue. He held the rope that had tied the boat to the dock in both hands. Sage glanced up and immediately saw a huddle of purple wetsuits on an approaching boat. Something told her that Team Purple was already in deep discussion about the clue. They had probably already come up with a full list of possible answers, and they probably knew which would be the easiest to locate in this part of the reef. Smarties, Sage grumbled. Smallest to largest. Plankton is a term for some of the smallest living things in the sea. The word plankton can refer to a plant, phytoplankton, or an animal, zooplankton, but it has to be tiny. Plankton is a food source for all kinds of sea animals, including coral. Even some of the largest animals in the ocean eat them. The great bean whales, from blue whales to humpbacks, filter plankton from the water. Schools of tiny fish dine on plankton, and larger fish then dine on the tiny fish. All marine life is connected. The largest predators rely on the tiniest plants and animals for survival.